So if we are going to check out the ways in Intune to configure Windows, then we need to analyze Windows a little bit. And Windows is when we do management for Windows machines, there's actually two ways that we can perform that kind of management. There's the WMI way, the Windows Management Instrumentation, and there's a little component called the WMI Bridge. And we have in Windows the OMA DM side of the configuration. OMA is short for the Open Mobile Alliance. The Open Mobile Alliance for device management. This is nothing else than a standard to manage devices. Now, Microsoft is using that standard in Windows, and also the other vendors like Android and or Google and Apple and so on. They also support OMA. It's just a different way of pretty much doing the same thing, and that is to make changes to the Windows configuration. The WMI side of things has been introduced in Windows 2000. Windows comes with a, let me get a little bit more space here. Windows comes with a WMI client, and the WMI client is responsible for receiving settings the Windows Management Instrumentation way. One way is, for example, there is a component here that is the group policy engine, and the group policy engine is responsible for receiving settings from Active Directory domain services, ADS. Obviously, this is the old-fashioned Active Directory that we know from the past, right? Probably we are still using it. And here we have group policy to push settings into Windows. And this is just one example. If you, for example, also you may be using System Center Configuration Manager or the Configuration Management Client, then here we have a couple of ways to receive settings using WMI. If we zoom in into the WMI bridge here, then what we could say that is in general, the WMI bridge supports about 7,500 different settings. OMA here, the Open Mobile Alliance solution at this point, supports about 2,500 settings. You don't have to be Einstein to understand that there is like 5,000 settings missing. However, on the Windows, from let's say the Microsoft perspective, these 7,500 settings are about many different things that we don't need anymore. Yeah, for example, think about your all-time favorite Windows version. Okay, so you're now thinking about, okay, what was my all-time favorite Windows version? Well, my personal favorite is Windows Vista. And it is because it had an Ultimate Edition. And you know, anything Ultimate is what you want, right? So, so Windows Vista came with a lot of features that we do not have today, like sidebar gadgets or Windows Dream Scene. And that is exactly those settings that we no longer need. And there is a many of those. Plus, OMA is designed for client operating systems only. Intune also only supports, it's only support for client operating systems. So every WME setting that relates to server kind of things, we don't need either. So those 2,500 settings are actually all right. Now, so GP engine, the WMI client are components to receive WME settings. In between there is a layer which is called the Common Configuration Service Provider. This is like, let's say, the decision maker of which of the two which of the two solutions are going to be used for actually, well, pushing those settings. On the other side, we have another client component in Windows, and this is the mobile device management client. The mobile device management client obviously is here to well, communicate with Intune, or more specific, it's here to communicate with mobile device management solutions. Intune obviously is the best one, but there's also others. And well, the mobile device management client is here to receive settings from mobile device management components. Intune itself has a component here, which is the company portal. The company portal is the interface for communication like this. And well, you know, the mobile device management client also sends back to Intune data that has been received or gathered by the client. Now, in Intune, we have all kinds of ways to push settings towards this client. One of the ways, let's say, so if we think about Intune configuration objects, then well, there's quite a few options here. One of them is that we can make use of so-called configuration profiles. Configuration profiles in Intune allow you to do settings for any supported operating system and any type of setting. So just a quick check on what I mean with this. If I check out configuration here, check out policies and then the profiles at this point, this is where you can find your configuration profiles. Here we can see that all the platforms that are supported are listed, not just Windows or Mac, but also iOS, Android, and so on. And if I, for example, select Windows and templates, you can see that it's not just security settings, but it's all kinds of settings. So thinking about that, any operating system, any setting, you can create those template based. You can use different templates for these. If you use the templates, then what you get is this is the OMA way of pushing settings towards a client. For example, if I create one of those, if I would want to use one of these templates and I want to go for, let's say, device restrictions like this, I can then go in, do some settings like this, and here we can see all kinds of settings. Very, very similar to things that you would typically do in group policies. However, now it's all in OMA. So that is template based, is OMA kind of settings. If in Intune these templates, if these kind of templates do not have in store what you need, then it does not necessarily mean that these settings are not to be implemented the OMA way. There is also, if necessary, you can create settings using a custom template. This allows you to go in and it allows you to go and set the exact setting yourself based on an OMA uniform resource identifier, the URI. If we go, let's do an OMA URI example or something. Let's search for that. Then here we have some description about this, and if you check out what an OMA URI looks like, it's like this. It says, hey, you know, you want to do a user or a device-based setting. Then it says, okay, user or device, the vendor of the product, Microsoft for Windows, policy setting, and then some location. So one of the things is that you could also use a custom template. And this is also the OMA way. However, in this case, you need to specify OMA URIs. And that is a little bit less intuitive than what we have here, where you can just use here you can use switches and settings and so on to just configure. Now, like we mentioned, WMI supports way more settings than OMA does, and Microsoft really wants us to move away from group policy and start using Intune. So what Microsoft did is that they created in Intune also a solution to work with administrative templates. Administrative template based is the WMI way. So if I this one, yes, that's here. So here I could just create my own OMA URI based setting. Or if I want to go in here, Windows again, you can also choose for administrative templates. And what Microsoft did with the administrative templates is that they went in and they said, hey, you know what? Let's just copy and paste. Group policies into Intune. So this is what a group policy looks like, right? You have this kind of thing like at least Windows Vista. Yeah, that's pretty nice, but Intune doesn't support Vista at all, right? So, this is actually a way for Microsoft to help people switch to Intune by also offering WMI-based settings to be deployed via Intune. Oh, and by the way, it is also allowed to import custom ADMX files, which is also the WMI way. And an ADMX file is just a file that makes up an administrative template. So, for example, if you want to go in here and import an ADMX file, I imported Chrome ADMX. You can then go and create another Windows profile that is based on the where is it here under the imported administrative templates. At this point in preview, there's one thing weird about my tenant, and that is that I imported the template at a point in time where Microsoft was working on the feature. And so in my case, when I did import the Chrome templates, however, if I want to configure them, I cannot use this, which would typically be the location for those settings. In my case, I would have to go to the traditional administrative templates, but it still works because if I check out my settings here, I can even see my Google and my Chrome settings that I can do straight from my environment here. So if I want to configure Google Chrome for my users, you can download from the Google websites. You can download that custom ADMX file for Google Chrome, import them, do your settings. That's basically what you can do. So you can work with configuration profiles, any operating system, any setting. Template based, you can have custom templates, you can have administrative templates, you can import your templates. There is one, let's say, a downside about these templates. That is that these templates are sort of fixed. And let's say if I check out my Windows list of templates, and let's say I want to do both VPN and Wi-Fi settings for my clients. Let's say that's what I want, VPN and Wi-Fi settings. Then in Intune, using those templates, there is for me no other way than creating two of those configuration profiles and assigning them to a group of devices twice. Because I cannot do VPN and Wi-Fi settings in one policy or in one profile. Because of that, you may want to be thinking a couple of times about your naming convention as well. However, Microsoft also tried to solve this by allowing you to create also for Windows, but also not with templates, but you can make use of the settings catalog. The settings catalog is it's different than template based. You can also choose. I want to make this look good, so my font has to be so. So I want to make use of the settings catalog, and a settings catalog allows us to gather well different settings from different or many or any area in Windows. However, the options are limited. Not super sure what Microsoft is doing here. If I check my settings catalog, for example, here we can then go in and well create some configuration settings. Here we can add settings from different areas. So you can say, hey, I want to do, for example, some browser settings. Let's add those in. Select those settings. Maybe I also want to do some, let's say, data protection settings. Let's add those. Let's do some other stuff like display settings. Let's check this. But what you'll notice if you go through the different settings, what you will notice is that we can indeed get settings from different areas. However, per area, the amount of settings are limited. So, yeah, unfortunately, I do not think at this point that this will solve all your problems using the settings catalog. There are many settings, it's true, but still compared to what those other templates allow you to do, well, the options are rather limited. The cool thing about configuration profiles is that you can choose settings for different types of devices. You can go in and say, hey, for iOS, I want to do some stuff. For macOS, I want to do some kind of configurations. Maybe for Android, I have other plans with other settings. Just like that, it's all there, right? So with configuration profiles, we have a way to configure our clients. Next to configuration profiles, you can also use as well configuration option. You can make use of endpoint. Yeah, you can make use of endpoint security policies. Endpoint security policies compared to configuration profiles, it's just Windows and macOS, and just and it's Windows. Let's say yeah, Windows and macOS, and only security related settings. That is limited. So if I check it out here, if I want to, so we have in devices, we have configuration profiles. Here on the left-hand side, in the main menu, we have endpoint security. And here we can see that we have a couple of settings, just security related, antivirus settings, disk encryption settings, firewall settings are here. Some other cool things like attack surface reduction. When we introduced Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, it came up with, we talked about attack surface reduction. Well, here we have, for example, attack surface reduction rules that are matching what Defender for Endpoint thinks that we should do. So here, for example, you can see block Adobe Reader from creating child processes. We can enable that. This is attack surface reduction. If, just a quick if I am, for example, in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, if I take the one device here that I want to, one device here that is in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, one of the security recommendations here could be block, and now I have to look for it, but block Adobe Reader from creating child processes is also something that you could find here. And that is basically the match between what Defender for Endpoint can tell you to do And we can then do it via Intune using those attack surface reduction rules here in security policy, in the security policies. However, and this is the weird part, um, between these two different types of settings, you could create conflicts. So you really have to be thinking about what kind of setting do I want to do in what way, and I want to make sure that I'm not accidentally sending two different types of settings to a single device or user, because that will turn out to be a conflict, and then we don't know what is going to be the outcome. In group policy, it's well documented on what happens if there is a conflicting setting. In Intune and OMA, it's not been designed like this, so the result is you may run into conflicts. Now, actually, thinking about group policy and what we can do with Intune here, we also run into the possibility of creating conflicts. However, between group policy and Intune, we have a solution. We can create a custom OMA URI based template that we can set, and that would be so we would be using an OMA URI based deployment that says MDM wins over group policy equals 1. That is a setting that you want to do to make sure that Intune based settings will win over group policies in case of a conflict. However, within Intune, you can still get those conflicts. So that is something that you want to be very, very careful with. This specific one here, the OMA URM MDM wins over GP, let me show you. I have that configured in my environment. It's a configuration profile here. I think it's somewhere here. Windows Auto Patch, MDM wins over GPO. If I check out the setting itself, then what I have here is a setting MDM wins over GP. The MDM policy is used and the group policy is blocked. That is basically the setting. In this case, I've done it via the settings catalog. Right? You can do that via the settings catalog. So with that, we can make sure that this conflict doesn't happen, but within Intune, conflicts may happen, and it's quite well, so you really have to pay attention on what you're doing here in order to get these things going. Now, when we think about those kind of settings here, then we have antivirus settings, we have disk encryption settings, we have firewall settings, we have the attack surface reduction settings, we have the MDE onboarding policy. We can do this here as well. So if you check this one out, so let's see if I am in endpoint security. Virus attack. So we have antivirus, disk encryption, firewall, attack surface reduction. This is endpoint detection and response. Is how to this you can also use to onboard your devices into Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. The same thing as we did earlier. And we have something new here, and that is the endpoint privilege management. And what we do with endpoint privilege management is that we can configure this, that we can tell users like, hey, if there is a certain executable that you must run as an administrator on your client, even if you are a normal user, but you still need a certain executable to run as admin, then we allow that to happen, but the user has to tell why, for example, and then you can also go in and say, okay, and what app are we going to allow in this case? For example, the Google Earth Pro setup, right? So that is something that we could do here. If you configure this, if you configure this properly, then you will actually you get to see an extra integration into Windows Explorer to make this to allow a user to run an executable with special privileges. That is the idea behind this solution. So that is something that we could also configure. Now this last thing here, endpoint privilege management, is something that you would need a special license for. It's not part of, let's say, the default integration of, it's not part of the default integration of Intune. You would need something special for it. Well, that is unfortunately what has to happen. So some different settings here as well that we can do, but still we can create conflicts. There is actually one real benefit here in the endpoint security settings, and that is that in endpoint security, it also comes with security templates, or actually security baselines. So, for example, if you need to implement security in your organization and you don't really know what to do, you don't really know what to do when it comes to security for your devices, then one of the things that you can do here is you can then go into security baselines. Here we see a couple of those baselines. You could, for example, go and say, hey, I want to implement everything that Microsoft Defender for Endpoint thinks I should do. And then we can take the settings in there. We can check out the properties here. And here we have a lot of settings that have been pre-populated for us. For example, including block Adobe Reader from creating child processes. So with that, we have actually a nice way to also implement security without having to think about what each setting means. You have to be careful with those baselines, because those baselines, they may be so secure that it will block certain solutions or applications from running successfully, and that would, well, suck. So therefore, I would say that this is something that you want to be careful with, but it's nice. It's a nice solution that you could pilot in your organization, and that also allows us to push some settings out. These are in Intune 2 configuration objects. Another thing we can do in Intune is we can deploy and run scripts. We can only do that. Yes.
Regarding the configuration profiles and the endpoint security policies, if there are how's Intune that you know, or do you have to figure it out on your own?
Oh, that is a good question. Let's say you create a conflict. How can you tell? Well, there's actually a couple of ways to tell. One way is by going into, for example, a configuration profile, right? So I have created a few here. Let's say I am going to check, let's say I want to check this one here, the Windows Health Monitoring, for example. Then here at this level, I can see if my profile is successfully implemented, if there's errors not applicable, or if there is any conflicts going on. And there is a report here that also dives a little bit deeper into this, because if there is a conflict, it will tell on which device it conflicted, or for what user. And then you can also dive into that device, and you can see that there are settings here, and well, which setting is the conflicting one. So that's a way to tell. You can also tell from the device side. So if there is a device, if we have a Windows device, for example, here, let's take this one. Then from the device side, we can also check out the device configuration. and then it shows all the settings, including whether or not there is a succeeded, error, not applicable, or conflict going on. So with that, you can actually you can recognize those conflicts. Well, great. Then also you can run scripts. This is something that we can do for Windows, and this is something that we can do for Mac OS. Here in my, if I go to devices and then in my list of device management, here we find scripts. This is where I could go in and, oh, ha 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 ha, and Linux. Yeah, baby. You can do some Linux management in Intune. So we didn't talk about that yet. And that is basically because the level of support for Linux in Intune is very limited. As discussed earlier, if you want to create a configuration profile, you cannot do that for Linux. You can do compliance monitoring for Linux. So that is something that is supported here, right? So that allows you to monitor certain security settings on the device, which we will cover at a later stage. In scripts here, you can also run a script for Linux. Now, if you have a script, the only thing that you would need to do is upload the file and tell us how to run it. That is something that you might also like to check out. Now, one of the things that we need to say about this, that the script runs once. So you deploy it, it runs once. There's no schedule or anything that you could say, hey, I want to run it every so many minutes or hours. Scripts, they run once. However, many people what they do with these scripts is, for example, they use a script to create a scheduled task, for example. Then get a little bit more here. Another thing that is also a configuration object in Intune. Actually, I have to look up the name because Microsoft changes it every now and then. It is something that I cannot find anymore. How cool! I feel stupid now. Let's just get rid of the new view. Let's use the previous view. Let's go back to the old way. Let's see what we get here. Overview. I was going away from the new view because it, come on, it's not too difficult. Very well. Submit feedback. Come on, I want to speed things up. Go into devices. It's called Remediations. Whoa, that took a while. So remediations for Windows, actually. This is Windows Remediations. This is also let's say a problem detection scripts. And you can do problem solving scripts that you can use here. Now, actually the cool thing is that in many cases they are created by Microsoft. And with Microsoft, well, that is nice because here, for example, we could see we can monitor, for example, if there's devices that have group policies that stall, or the Office click to run apps are, for example, stopped and we need to restart them, then Microsoft has created these scripts for me. And I just have to go and tell which devices need to run it. And well, actually, if you check out the content, then there is a detection script and a remediation script here. And that is run in order to keep your machines clean. You can also create your own script packages. So you can go and say, hey, I have my own script package which has a detection script, remediation script, and how to run. So you can create those yourself, or custom. They are created by Microsoft, or you can have your own remediations in Intune. These are the Intune configuration objects. That, by the way, goes besides something that we haven't covered yet, but we'll do that in a later stage. This is next to, for example, objects that are here to deploy applications or deploy updates, for example. And also this does not cover compliance policies yet. But with these here, we have a solution to sort of move away from group policies and start managing our devices the Intune way. Oh, speaking of something here, if you have group policies here, then one of the solutions is that in Intune we have something called, it's an Intune thing, it's called group policy analytics. It allows you to import a gpresult.xml file into Intune. gpresult.xml is what you get if you do a backup of your group policy. It will then check if the settings in that group policy are also supported using mobile device management and OMA. And if that is the case, you can then get to see the level of, well, compliance. So we can, basically what we do is we analyze the MDM support in that policy. And if we are happy with it, we can also migrate the group policy into Intune. So if we check that one out, here in devices, we can go in and we can open up group policy analytics. Here we can import a GP report XML file here. Once we have imported this, it shows here. It shows to what extent it is supported by mobile device management. So here we have a couple of settings that I've done in group policy that we are now checking with mobile device management and Intune. And if I'm happy with this, there's a migrate function and I can choose which settings I would like to migrate into a component, a profile in Intune. Super nice, because that saves us maybe a lot of time in order to get our group policies over in Intune. On the other hand, if you are switching from, let's say, on-premise management and group policy, and if you are switching towards Intune, that might be a great time to overthink again what settings you are doing and if that is still necessary or if there is some other needs that you have, right? It's a great time to clean up your mess as well. That is everything that we can do in Intune to configure devices.